All right, good morning, everyone. It is 8 o'clock on the nose, and I want to welcome you to
Recording in
EFMP
progress.
Connect event. This is a fairly new resource for our EFMP Central Cell, and it was certainly developed to connect our families with the experts at the AFPC EFMP Central Cell. That's us, the assignments, the medical, the family support, and then the special education piece. And we're going to talk about topics that significantly impact our families. We've been hearing from you, and we want to be able to address those and be transparent in what we do up here at the Central Cell. So it is only fitting that this month, our topic of discussion is back to school. So some of you are in states, maybe you're getting ready for back to school, or some of you have already started. I know a lot of the early states are starting this week and next week. So I know it seems like summer has just begun for some of us who's, ended late, but I've seen some back to school commercials and I've seen sales on school supplies. So I guess it is time to have that discussion about back to school. So today's session will be broken up into two parts. First part, we'll hear from our three experts on special education topics. Then we'll open up our breakout rooms. That's our part 2 session for some question and answer and kind of one-on-one or a small group time with our experts. So we'll have 2 rooms for you today. One will be EDIS, early intervention, or those kiddos from 0 to 3 years old. And then our second breakout room will be for special education from 3 to 21 years old. So before we begin with our first experts, we want to make sure, whoops, I forgot to turn the slide. Here we go. So before we begin, we want to remind you that don't put any personal information, that's your PII, including any medical information in the chat or as we speak in this forum or in the breakout forum. Instead, we'd like for you to enter in any of your questions, any concerns or challenges you have into the workflow email address. And I believe that's on the screen on the bottom. And we will get you an expert to answer those questions for you. Okay, so without further ado, I want to welcome our EDIS program manager. She's going to kick us off. And Miss Melissa, are you ready?
Thank you and welcome so much and for coming today. And I just wanted to give a real brief overview of EDIS, just so you could learn a little bit about what the program is and what it offers. So if you have some interest in the breakout group, you can come and join us. So to the next slide. So when we think about back to school, we usually think about that brick and mortar school, but babies are in school every single day of their life. So we want to also make sure when we're thinking about back to school that we're thinking about helping our infants and toddlers be ready for school. So be ready for every day, be ready so that they can learn and grow and meet their potential. Next slide. So the military actually offers what's called early intervention services. These are services for infants and toddlers ages birth to 36 months. Early intervention programs are designed to help children that are experiencing developmental delay. So what is a developmental delay? That's a child that might be developing a little bit slower than their peers. So there's an early intervention program called EDIS. It's Educational and Developmental Early Intervention Services. And then EDIS also provides related services to DODEA schools. The next slide. So some of the functions of the EDIS program. So when we talk about an early intervention program, what do they do? What is their purpose? The first thing is public awareness. So public awareness of potential developmental delays. So what to look for, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, and we can talk about that more in the breakout session about what to look for potential delays. What does typical development look like? EDIS also offers evaluations. So how do we determine that a child has a developmental delay? We provide evaluations to determine those delays. And then we also have service delivery. which is usually the part that most people think about when you think about intervention services and you think about speech therapy, occupational therapy. You usually think about that service piece. And services for early intervention, as I mentioned before, young children aren't in school. So where are they? They're usually in the home or the child care center. So that's where services are delivered, where that child spends the majority of their time. Next slide. So I wanted to kind of point out today and just kind of give a little bit of a teaser on this. So I talked about how do you know about if your child has a potential developmental delay? Well, there's some resources out there. If you've ever taken your baby to a well baby check, you'll notice that usually the doctor gives you some kind of screener. Usually they use something that's called an ASQ. But those screeners is really just a checklist. And what that checklist is looking at is it's looking at what is your baby doing? So it's asking you questions about what your child is doing and matching them to their age. So their peers, typically developing peers, their same age. So there's a bunch of resources out here that you can do to kind of track your own child's development. So I've linked right here. These are some of the checklists for 2 months all the way to 5 years old. Next one. So how do we know about developmental concerns? So let's say you have these developmental concerns. What do? You want to first talk to your doctor. Ask your doctor about your child's development. Ask for a developmental screening. And just talk to your doctor about the concern. So what are those specific things that you're seeing that are concerning you? A typical concern that we hear from parents is concern about their baby not talking or concerns about their baby not walking yet. Talk to your doctor about those things and he or she can help direct you to the resources that you might need. Complete the checklists. I think the best thing that you can do for your baby, just how your kids have tests at school, they have these check-ins at school, they have these lessons at school, these checklists are similar to that. So these checklists are a way for you to track your child's development and make sure that they're hitting their milestones. Ask about a developmental screening. A developmental screening is usually provided by a specialist who has a background in child development. So has a specialty in knowing how your baby learns and grows. And then also ask for an evaluation. So as I mentioned before, EDIS services provide evaluations. Evaluations can let you know at this point in time, so this moment in time, does your child have a delay? So then the next slide. So I talked about that the military has these EDIS programs. So we have a number of EDIS programs around the world. You'll notice looking at this slide right here that the EDIS services are not just provided by the Air Force, but they're also provided by the Navy and Army. So since we have joint bases, the EDIS program is a joint program. So you might be assigned to an area where the Air Force isn't the lead for the EDIS program. It might be the Navy or the Army. So you want to look on your installation to know if there is an EDIS program there. Next slide. If you happen to end up on a base or a location that doesn't have an EDIS program, no worries. There are EDIS programs in all 50 states. Early intervention services is a part of special education. So what you're going to hear from next is you're going to hear about special education for children 3 to 21. Well, early intervention takes care of those kids from the age of 0 to 3 years old. So we want to make sure that all kids have the best opportunity to learn and grow. So that 0 to 3 population, the way that they receive services is through early intervention. And all 50 states have an early intervention program. So if you're interested in learning more about typical developmental milestones, how to screen, how to ask for help, how to reach out, what specifically do you ask for, come join me in the breakout group and we can discuss more. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weedle. I appreciate that talk about our 0 to 3 cohort out there. All right, so next portion is me. I am the special education specialist. I sit in the AFPC EFMP Central Cell, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today. And you might be joining us because you're a family member who has some concerns about education. You might be a service provider at the installation level wanting to figure out how to get the most help for the families. And so I wanted to just kind of talk about at first where all of these resources are and where we're starting to develop that support for you at each level. So here you can see some graphics about where our partners are. We provide consultation, advice, and training and resources to all of those little bubbles that you see. And sometimes we feel like an OSI agent, like investigating where these things are and how it unfolded and how a family got to a place that they are in right now with the concerns that they have. So the way that it's broken down, our resources, is two different ways. One is directly from our families, whether they reach out through the workflow or a warm handoff from any of these agencies, or we have families indirectly being helped because we're helping those installation support or even headquarters support elements that are helping the families. So our model certainly is a tiered support model where we have tier 1 support at the installations. And then if it's out of their scope of expertise, then tier 2 at the central cell supports you. Okay, here I have highlighted some ways that our partners can support you and help you. First is kind of smoothing out misunderstandings or roadblocks in communication with schools, because sometimes it's not an issue, it just maybe looks like an issue because there were some misunderstandings. They can also track trends and advocate for education changes with the military families. They can do that at the state level, local level, state level, and if you're at a DODEA location, with the DODEA district level as well. They can give you information on your rights as a parent, what a school or a district policy says, interpreting those things, because sometimes it can be, you know, a little cumbersome to read, as well as some general DoD policy, federal law, like the IDEA. We're going to talk more about those. And more importantly, that they're familiar with their own state education policy. And we're going to go back to what I said before about that tier 1 support. It's really important when we're talking about special education that we are tapping into the resources at the state level, because every state runs their education, their Department of Education, just a little bit differently with different timelines and different resources. So your experts are at your state level experts are at your installation. Okay, this is a piece of a chart that was part of a flyer, and it is available for you, identifying some of the most frequently asked services. But please be aware that sometimes not all installation services look exactly like this, and so it would be good for you to reach out to your installation team members and ask them, hey, you know, I saw this on a slide when the EFMP Central Cell was presenting, and can you tell me a little bit more about it, and where do you fit in with those services? Okay. So another notable resource for you as you PCS or are embedded in one location is this thing called MIC3. MIC3 stands for Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission, and it's a council of state representative and military representative that kind of own or govern the compact, the interstate compact. And the military representatives who are part of the MIC3 or the compact are the DSLOs, and they are consistently reaching back to the school liaisons at each locations to bring up any possible updates or concerns that the MIC3 should be aware of, and then maybe they want to add to the interstate compact. And they work to ease some of that education transitions of school-aged military-connected children attending public schools. So this is for public schools and DODEA schools, because DODEA also has signed up. It covers 4 different areas: enrollment, placement, eligibility, and graduation. And for those students with special education need, the policy area of concern that is the most relevant here is placement, right? Will my child get the similar services? Will she or he get the similar minutes? Will they be in a small classroom? Will they have a one-on-one aid, right? Those are all placement concerns. And then our next guest speaker will talk more about these other policy areas and how that impacts you as a family, a military family member. So this one real quick, I just wanted to throw it up there. Some most notable areas of challenge that we've been tracking military students have to do with FAPE. And FAPE, there's a lot of acronyms, right? When it comes to special education, one of these is FAPE. It's free and appropriate public education. One area is delay in getting the appropriate services or evaluations. When you move to a new state, they say, hey, no, we gotta wait, and we gotta observe and wait before we can do an evaluation. And sometimes that, when you're on station only for a short time, 1 or 2 years, then that waiting 6 months is gonna be a detrimental portion of the support for your children. So second area is inadequate comparable services or comparable services, meaning, you're not getting the similar services that you used to receive in the losing location, whether it's a duration or frequency or placement. Sometimes they don't have a small resource room. They used to get pulled out and put in a small, like a 2-to-1 resource room, or a 3-to-1 resource room, or they don't have a specialized teacher, like a deaf and hard of hearing teacher. That could be something that kind of allows you to feel like, or makes you feel like there isn't that comparable service, right? You're not getting that comparable service. So we're going to move on. We'll talk more about that at the breakout rooms if you have questions about any of those. But I wanted to also throw in there some of the resources that our Central Cell has produced and is starting to slowly get out to the public, summarizing some of the installation supports that's available for you. Roadmap to PCSing with an IEP. That's one of those things I feel like everyone should have with them, just as a reminder, because I know you do it all the time. And so how do you best travel with an IEP? And Ms. Aka, when she follows me, she'll talk more about that as well, about some of the pitfalls and trying to avoid them while you're PCSing. This is a picture of a snapshot of our DAF family vector. Our team and our legal team has a library of special education videos that Ms. Aka has put together, and some wonderful resources. Some parts are still under construction, but new content is being added, and I'd like for you to go and play around with it, look for the answers to questions you have, and then let us know what you'd like to see, because we'd love to build this up that makes it a terrific resource for you and your family. So that is my part, and we're going to have Ms. Aka join us. She's from the EFM Legal Assistance and Policy.
Thank you, Ms. Che. Good morning, everyone. Very, very happy to join you guys this morning. I'm going to speak very briefly right now, but I'm looking forward to seeing some of you in the breakout rooms for any additional questions you may have. So I am lead for EFM Legal Assistance Policy, and job simply is to ensure that the field enables all skills and resources that are needed for various to assist you in understanding the laws that protect your rights and your children's rights in the area of special education, and that you are able to access legal assistance should you find that that's necessary as you navigate the special education process. All right, next slide, please. So this is my team. I have a team of 3, myself, Major Jed Wangsgard, who's joining us and will be in a breakout as well, and our law office manager, Tech Sergeant Tarisha Dees. So we have 4 primary functions. We want to train the field, as I mentioned before, to ensure that we're enabling legal assistance practitioners to help you. We want to do policy analysis and guidance for Air and Space Force and make sure that our leadership is informed on the types of things that are impacting our readiness and our retention with respect to special education. And we want to do lots of outreach, and this is part of it. We want you to know that we're here, and we want you to come seek our services when you find that that's necessary. So there are going to be some times when we will do direct case representation, but as Ms. Che mentioned, we are a tiered operation, which means that should you find the need for legal assistance, we ask that you seek out your legal assistance office in your installation and find an attorney there who's ready and waiting to help you. What they will do if they need assistance with your case is reach back to us at the headquarters level, and we avail ourselves for that level of support as well as the resources that are necessary. Now, at some point, we may determine there to be systemic type issues, meaning chronic noncompliance in a particular jurisdiction, a particular school district, and that's where we will engage more directly in trying to get those situations corrected for our military families. Next slide. All right, so again, Ms. Che mentioned that we'll talk a little bit about some of the hurdles, some of the things that you might experience as you PCS from one location to another. And so this is just a kind of a quick list guide of some things that you might want to think about before your PCS move, during your PCS move, when you arrive at your new location as well. So the first and most important thing is to hand carry your school records. We can talk about the importance of this some more, but simply stated, if your receiving school is not aware of the services that your child is receiving, then they can't offer comparable services. Sounds pretty simple, but it's definitely a recurring problem. And I'll tell you just a little bit about making sure that you have those school records and how you can access those. Transferring your IEP to the school. Make sure the incoming school is aware of what services are needed so that you can ensure that those comparable services are actually available. And if they're not, you can start to address that ahead of time so that we don't get on ground and then lose a lot of ground when our children start school and potentially start falling behind. So once the accommodations have been agreed upon, make sure that they're actually in place. I can certainly tell you a little bit more in breakout rooms about, situations where parents believe that accommodations are actually happening, and 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, you hear from your child that no, actually this is not happening. So we want to stay on that, ensure that those services are being provided. Seek our guidance when you need it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're already in a state of dispute with the school. That means that you may want to understand what your rights are. You may want to understand what's going on in an IEP meeting or what should be expected. Any of those types of things, your legal assistance counsel at your location can assist you in navigating. So one of the things, again, I want to mention, and I think Ms. Che mentioned this as well, is states do things differently. So you got to understand not only what the federal provisions are for IEP and 504 and so forth, but what are your state provisions? And they are all available on the State Department of Education website, but certainly hold your school responsible. Ask them for the types of information you're looking for. The parent guide that they should be giving you, the parent handbook should answer a lot of your questions. But if it doesn't, familiarize yourself with your state laws or certainly reach out to us again if you need assistance with that. So again, know what your child's academic record looks like, know what their progress looks like so you can ensure that continuity of progress. Make sure you know what your child's, your new school's disciplinary policies are and ensure that those are in compliance with the federal laws with respect to children with disabilities. So in summary of that long list of what to do that I just gave you, plan ahead. Make sure that the school has an opportunity to plan ahead. Maintain your records. Keep copies of those physically on your person as you move. Advocate for your children and seek help early and often. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I alluded to some of these in the prior slide, but the big ticket federal laws that govern special education are the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Section 504. I won't go into these in this broader forum, but any questions you have about those, Ms. Che and I and Major Wangsgard will be able to answer those for you in our breakout rooms. But the one I want to draw your attention to is FERPA, the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act of 1974. So just a second ago, I said, make sure you have your children's records, maintain those. FERPA is what allows you to access those records, inspect them, make sure that any errors that you determine in those records are corrected, and have your own copies. Now, I will add a caveat here, which is that if we are talking about DODEA, FERPA does not apply because FERPA applies to Department of Education as a federal entity. FOIA will apply to the DODEA schools. And again, if you want to know more about that, how to get your records, we can definitely talk about that more in our breakouts. Next slide, please. All right, so we talked a little bit about the Interstate Compact just a few minutes ago. I've expanded upon it a little bit here in this slide, but remember that this has been signed on by all 50 states. And so anywhere you are going, this is part of your toolkit of resources to ensure that you are and DODEA as well, that you are able to exercise your child's rights, and you are able to ensure that there is comparable services, that there is a similar placement. Placement, again, as Ms. Shea said, is a really big issue. There's some benefits as well that the compact confers upon you, like some extensions for immunizations. Being able to use those unofficial records that I just mentioned, you should have copies of to make sure that you can do that initial enrollment. And it does require the school to initially follow that incoming IEP. We hear about situations where the school says, well, we want to reevaluate, or, we're not accepting this IEP, this type of thing. Well, there are rules around that. And initially they've got to follow that IEP that you are transferring from your losing school to your gaining school. And so a lot of folks don't either know about or utilize these protections enough. And we want to talk to you a little bit more about what those are. Graduation is a huge deal. Oftentimes we have to move right when those kids are about to graduate. And in that situation, there are some options that are provided by the Interstate Compact to ensure that that child is able to receive the graduation, their graduation diploma, either from the new school or from the losing school. So again, we can talk more about those. Next slide, please. All right, so hopefully you're starting to get some ideas about how legal assistance can be helpful to you in navigating special education. But I wanted to share some touch point examples with you. So sometimes you may find yourself new to the special education process and you're starting to hear these acronyms thrown out, like IEP, right? We've already thrown that one out, Individualized Education Program. You don't know what to expect, but you're supposed to show up at this IEP meeting. If you find yourself in that situation, as Ms. Shea said, first talk to your school liaison. But as the process develops and you may find just some more questions, or questions about the law, or questions about what should be included, or any of those types of things, go see your legal assistance counsel and they'll be able to help you with that. You get to school and they're not accepting the IEP and they're not providing the accommodations, and you've attempted to remedy this already by talking with your school liaison or by talking with your school directly. We have situations where folks can't even get the school to set up a meeting for several weeks. That's a situation where, again, you should engage with your legal counsel and seek assistance. Should you find yourself in a dispute, at this point, you've that initial level of trying to negotiate things with the school, you've had an IEP meeting, and there's not a meeting of the minds of what your child's rights are or what services should be provided. Well, we can talk to you about those disputes, we can talk to you about possible remedies, and we can also engage with the school in assisting to come to a resolution. And so when you find yourselves in these situations, please see us, and I'm going to tell you how to find your legal assistance counsel. Next slide, please. Okay, before I do that, I'll tell you what resources you can get when you do go to legal. So we've created these brochures for you.
I think we lost audio for her. I'm sorry about that, but I know she's at the very end of it, where this is the QR code that you see before you to be able to find your legal assistance at your installation. So it's a snapshot. So take a picture of it, and then keep that handy and find your legal assistance. Okay, so we are at the end, and we're going to go ahead and do our breakout sessions. Remember that there are 2 breakout rooms. One is for 0 to 3, and the other one is for 3 to 21. Sorry, I forgot to turn my camera on. So there'll be 2 sessions, and you're welcome to pop in and out of each of the sessions. We have slated about half an hour, maybe a little bit more. If you have a lot of questions, we want to be able to address all of your concerns that you have. So at this time, if you want to go ahead and find a breakout session for you, we'll see you on that side. Okay.